A gang of 5 men cornered a 79-year-old grandmother on a darkening street, grabbing at her purse while she trembled and begged them to stop. But what they didn't see was 12 members of the Hells Angels watching through a diner window across the road. Within seconds, those leather-clad bikers were crossing the street, and the gang suddenly realized they'd made a catastrophic mistake. But what happens when men who've chosen intimidation as a lifestyle come face to face with a brotherhood that doesn't bluff? The evening air hangs heavy with the smell of exhaust and hot asphalt, twilight that turns everything amber and makes shadows stretch long across cracked pavement, dark tendrils reaching across the concrete. The street is quieter than usual. That strange in-between hour when the shops start closing, but the bars haven't filled yet. The city holding its breath between day and night, suspended in liminal space where anything can happen. Margaret O'Connor clutches her worn leather purse closer to her chest, the same one Henry gave her 47 years ago on their anniversary at that little Italian restaurant on 7th Street. Its strap soft from decades of her fingers worrying the edges, the brass clasp dulled by touch and time until it's taken on the warm patina of a life well lived. She's walking home from the corner market with a small bag of groceries, eggs, bread, a single banana that's just the right amount of green, the Earl Grey tea she drinks every morning while watching the sparrows outside her kitchen window, the same window where Henry used to stand with his coffee, pointing out the cardinals and blue jays, teaching her their calls, their habits, their secret lives. The bag crinkles against her hip with each step, her sensible shoes, the orthopedic ones her daughter insisted she buy last Christmas, scuffing the sidewalk in a rhythm she's walked 10,000 times, from the market on 5th to her apartment on Maple, past the laundromat that always smells like fabric softener and dryer sheets, past the pawn shop with its dusty guitars hanging in the window, collecting sunlight and broken dreams, past the bodega where Mr. Martinez always asks about her health, and sometimes slips an extra apple into her bag when he thinks she's not looking. This route is her ritual, her Tuesday evening meditation, the walk that punctuates her week and reminds her that she's still here, still moving, still part of the world, even though Henry isn't beside her anymore, even though his hand isn't tucked into the crook of her elbow, the way it was for half a century. Her mind drifts to those sparrows, particularly the one with a crooked left wing, how it lands a little sideways on the feeder, but still manages to get the best seeds, still holds its own against the bigger birds. And she finds something inspiring in that, a reminder that surviving doesn't always look graceful, but it counts just the same. The sky is turning that particular shade of purple-gray that Henry used to call stormlight, even when there were no storms coming, and she remembers how he'd stand at their window and narrate the weather like a poet, finding beauty in the ordinary, making her see the world through his eyes. She misses that. She misses him. She misses having someone to tell about the crooked-winged sparrow, someone who'd understand why it matters, why these small observations are what keep her tethered to life when grief tries to pull her under. When she notices the group of young men, it's their laughter first, sharp and hollow, echoing off the brick buildings as if someone's breaking glass. Sounds that don't belong in this neighborhood at this hour. 5 of them, maybe early 20s, maybe younger. It's hard to tell anymore when you're 79, and everyone under 40 looks like a child. They're peeling away from the wall where they'd been slouched, smoking and talking in that aggressive way young men have when they're performing for each other. And they're moving toward her with that particular swagger, making her heart kick hard against her ribs. An animal recognition of danger, older than language itself. She recognizes the walk, the predatory lean of young men with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Young men who've learned that power comes from making others afraid, mistaking cruelty for strength and intimidation for respect. One wears a gold chain that catches the dying light, thick and gaudy, probably costing more than her monthly Social Security check. Another has teardrops tattooed beneath his left eye, 3 of them, dark against his skin, and she knows enough to know what those might mean, what they might signify about a life lived in darkness. Their jeans hang low, boxers showing, brand names she doesn't recognize emblazoned across waistbands, and their hands are shoved deep in pockets or hanging loose at their sides, and she can read the body language, the coiled energy, the potential for violence that crackles in the air between them like static electricity before a storm. "Hey, Grandma," the one with the chain calls out, voice dripping with mock sweetness, with false courtesy that's somehow more threatening than open aggression. "What you got in the bag? Something good? Something worth sharing?" She keeps walking, eyes forward, following Henry's lesson from years ago when they lived in the city and had to navigate subway stations late at night. How you're supposed to handle trouble. Don't engage, don't make eye contact, don't show fear even when you're drowning in it. Just keep moving, keep breathing, keep pretending you're invisible. But they're circling now, closing the distance like wolves who've caught the scent of something wounded, and she can smell cigarettes and cheap cologne mixed with the sharp scent of marijuana or alcohol, maybe both, and underneath it, all the smell of young male sweat and aggression. The grocery bag crinkles louder now, amplified by the sudden quiet that's fallen between them, and she realizes they've stopped talking to each other, that all their attention is focused on her, that she's become their entertainment, their prey, their way of proving something to themselves and each other. Her hands are shaking, fingers pale against the brown paper of the grocery bag, and she considers speeding up, but knows her 79-year-old legs can't outrun 20-year-old malice, that arthritis and osteoporosis don't compete well against youth and adrenaline. Her heart is hammering so hard she can feel it in her throat, in her temples, in her fingertips, and she's suddenly aware of every vulnerability, the thinness of her bones, the fragility of her skin, the weakness in her knees that sometimes buckles when she's just walking upstairs. "We're talking to you," another one says, his voice harder now, edge sharpened, and he steps directly into her path, and she stops because there's nowhere else to go, because 5'7" of tattooed menace is blocking the sidewalk, his shadow falling across her, a dark prophecy made flesh, everything she's been afraid of since Henry died, and left her alone in a world that suddenly seemed much more dangerous. She looks up at him and sees a boy who probably has a mother out there, who ate breakfast this morning and laughed at something on his phone, who probably has dreams and fears and people who love him, but right now he's not a boy. He's a threat. He's danger made flesh. And she feels her throat closing up, feels tears pricking at her eyes, feels the terrible helplessness of being old and small and alone. She recalls Henry, gone now 3 years this October, how he'd always walk on the street side of the sidewalk to protect her from splashing cars, how he'd hold doors for strangers and help old ladies with their groceries and carry heavy things for neighbors without being asked, how he never raised his voice in anger, except once when a man cut her off in traffic and almost caused an accident, and Henry had honked and shouted because the thought of losing her made him fierce. Henry would know what to do. Henry always knew what to do. But Henry is gone, and she's alone, and these boys are circling closer. "Please," she manages, voice small and wavering as wind through dead leaves, barely audible. "I'm just trying to get home." The words come out broken, fractured by fear, and she hates how weak she sounds, how old, how utterly defenseless. They laugh at that, a chorus of cruel amusement that cuts straight through her, and one reaches for her purse, fingers already on the strap, tugging, and something inside her chest shatters. Not just fear now, but grief, because this purse is all she has left of touch-worn memories, of anniversary dinners at the Italian place on 7th, where Henry proposed over tiramisu and cheap wine, of Sunday drives through the mountains where they'd stop at roadside diners and hold hands across Formica tables, of Henry's hand finding hers in the dark of movie theaters, squeezing twice to say, "I love you," without words. Inside this purse is her social security card, with both their signatures faded but still visible, the receipt from their last dinner together dated 3 years ago, a pressed flower from their garden, a yellow rose that Henry grew from a cutting his mother gave him. Also, the $37 in cash that has to last until Thursday when her check comes, and her house keys with the tiny silver heart keychain their daughter Sarah gave her before she moved to Seattle for that job that was too good to turn down, even though it meant leaving Margaret alone. The leader leans in close, so close she can count his pores, can see the scar above his eyebrow that's shaped like a crescent moon, can smell his breath sour with beer and cigarettes and something rotten underneath. "Old lady, just give us the purse and nobody gets hurt," he says, and his hand is tight on her wrist now, squeezing, and she feels the bones grinding together beneath papery skin that bruises if you look at it wrong. Skin that's never quite recovered from that fall last winter when she slipped on ice and spent 6 weeks with her arm in a cast. The pressure increases and she gasps, and he smiles at that, enjoys it, feeds on her fear like it's nourishment, and she understands with terrible clarity that this isn't really about money, that this is about power, about making himself feel strong by making her feel weak. She closes her eyes, waiting for whatever comes next, her mind on the sparrows, wondering if anyone will remember to feed them, if Mrs. Chen next door will notice she hasn't come home. If this is how it ends, not peacefully in her sleep like everyone hopes, but scared and robbed on a Tuesday evening, with eggs in a bag and the smell of someone else's cigarettes in her nose, and Henry's memory being torn away by strangers. She remembers her daughter's voice on the phone last Sunday saying, "Mom, you should really think about moving to a safer neighborhood, maybe something closer to me, maybe Seattle isn't so bad." And how she'd insisted she was fine, that this was her home, that Henry's memory lived in these streets, in the apartment they'd shared, in the garden he'd planted, in every corner of a life they'd built together. The hand on her wrist squeezes harder, and she hears someone say, "Just take it," and she feels the purse starting to slip from her shoulder. Feels 43 years of marriage sliding away into the hands of strangers who'll dump it in a trash can once they've taken the cash, who'll toss Henry's flower and their last receipt and everything that makes her her into some dumpster without a second thought. Across the street, through the wide plate glass window of Rosie's Diner, with its neon Harley-Davidson sign glowing orange against the darkening sky, a beacon of warmth and safety. 12 men in leather vests sit around pushed-together tables, forks scraping plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, coffee mugs raised in toast to nothing in particular and everything that matters, talking about the ride up the coast tomorrow, about weather forecasts and scenic routes, and who needs new tires before they head out. The air inside smells like grease and coffee and pie, apple pie cooling on the counter, its cinnamon sweetness mixing with the salt of French fries and the bitter comfort of dark roast. That particular diner smell, that's the same whether you're in Michigan or Montana or anywhere in between. The smell of American working-class sanctuary. Rosie herself is refilling mugs, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, laugh lines deep around her eyes from 40 years of serving bikers who tip well and never cause trouble in her place, who treat her establishment as sacred ground, the home some of them never had. Jake Morrison, the chapter president with more road behind him than ahead, sits at the head of the table, his vest covered in patches that tell stories, places he's been from Sturgis to Daytona, brothers he's lost with their names stitched in memoriam, causes he's supported from veterans' charities to children's hospitals. He's 58, Vietnam vet, 2 tours, came home in 73 with nightmares that still wake him sometimes, 2 kids grown and gone with families of their own. And he comes to Rosie's every Tuesday because his wife Linda died 4 years ago, from cancer that ate her up from the inside. And the empty house gets too quiet sometimes, echoes with her absence, reminds him that he's still here and she's not. The brotherhood fills some of that emptiness, gives him purpose, reminds him that protecting people is what he's always done, what he's good at, what gives his life meaning. He's reaching for his coffee, the mug warm against his calloused palms, when he sees it first, the old woman surrounded, shrinking into herself like a flower closing at dusk, the distinctive choreography of predators and prey he witnessed in back alleys in Saigon, and bad neighborhoods in Detroit, and anywhere young men with something to prove decide someone vulnerable is fair game. His hand stops midair, mug suspended, coffee sloshing slightly, and for a moment he's back in 71, watching villagers get pushed around by soldiers who'd forgotten what they were supposed to be protecting, forgot that power means responsibility, that strength means defending the weak, not exploiting them. The woman across the street has white hair like his mother's, like Linda's was before she died. That same careful way of moving that speaks of arthritis and age and bones that break easier than they used to. And one of the punks has his hand on her wrist, and an old, cold readiness settles in Jake's chest. That combat clarity arriving when the situation is simple and the right action is obvious. He doesn't say a word, just stands, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound that cuts through conversation, like a knife through silk, and the sound lingers for half a heartbeat before the others notice, before they follow his gaze out the window, before they read the situation in an instant with the wordless communication born from riding together for years, from trusting each other with your life at 80 miles an hour on mountain roads, from being brothers in ways that matter most. Tommy sees it next, sets down his fork with deliberate care, his jaw tightening. Big Mike pushes his plate away, already calculating. Carlos, Dex, Johnny, Rick. One by one, they stand. A wave of leather and purpose, and the air in the diner changes, grows heavier, charged with intention. Jake takes one step forward, just one, but it's enough to make the gang leader stumble backward, his expensive sneakers scraping against asphalt. The mathematics of violence are simple and ancient. 12 against 5, experience against bravado, men who've lived through real wars against boys who've only seen them in video games. "There's no play here where you win," Jake says, his voice low and steady, the sort of calm more frightening than any shout. "You've got about 10 seconds to apologize to this lady and disappear before this becomes the worst decision of your life." The kid with the teardrop tattoos is already backing away, hands raised, reading the situation better than his friends. But the leader is caught in that terrible moment between pride and survival, his jaw working, fists clenching and unclenching. Tommy moves to Jake's right, Big Mike to his left, and suddenly the circle tightens, becomes inescapable, and Jake can see the exact moment the leader breaks, when self-preservation wins over ego. "We didn't mean nothing," the leader mumbles, voice cracking, and Jake feels something like pity mixed with disgust. These kids don't even know what they're playing at, don't understand that intimidation is a currency you can't spend when you're outmatched. "Ma'am, we're sorry, we just..." But Margaret isn't looking at him, isn't accepting anything from him, and Jake respects that, understands that some apologies are just words people say when they're cornered. "Get out of here," Jake says. And it's not loud, but it carries, and the gang evaporates like morning fog, scrambling away with muttered excuses that sound like whimpers, tripping over themselves to put distance between them and consequences. They disappear around the corner at almost a run, and Jake watches until they're gone, until he's sure they're not coming back, before he turns his full attention to Margaret. She's standing there trembling, still clutching her groceries and that precious worn leather purse, and he can see she's crying now, really crying. Tears that come only after danger passes and your body finally admits how scared you were. "Ma'am," he says, softer now, and he reaches out slowly, telegraphing the movement, letting her see it coming. His hand is steady on her shoulder, and he can feel how fragile she is beneath his palm. Bird bones and papery skin, and something in him aches for every grandmother who has to navigate a world that should protect them but doesn't. "You're safe now. They're gone." Carlos, who's always been the gentle one, the one who volunteers at the soup kitchen on Saturdays, kneels down and picks up the egg carton that fell during the confrontation, checks it carefully, finds them all miraculously intact. "Not a single one broken," he says, smiling up at her, and it's such a small kindness. But Margaret laughs through her tears, a sound reminiscent of wind chimes, and Jake senses the tension beginning to drain from the air. "Let us walk you home," Jake says, and it's not really a question, but he makes it sound like one, gives her the dignity of choice. Margaret nods, unable to speak, and they form up around her like an honor guard. This unlikely escort of leather and chrome and gray beards. Tommy goes back to Rosie's to settle the bill and tell her what happened, and Jake can see Rosie through the window, nodding, understanding, probably already planning to make a fresh pot of coffee for when they get back. They walk slowly, matching Margaret's pace, and 12 motorcycles crawl behind them at walking speed, their engines a protective rumble that echoes off the buildings, and Jake notices curtains twitching in windows, people looking out, witnessing this strange procession. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop stands in her doorway, hand over her mouth, and she waves at Margaret, relief visible on her face, and Jake realizes this neighborhood knows her, cares about her, has probably been worried about her walking alone. Margaret finds her voice as they walk, small at first, but growing stronger. "I'm Margaret O'Connor," she says, and Jake introduces himself, then the others. Tommy, Carlos, Big Mike, Dex, Johnny, Rick, Steve, Paul, Kevin, Marcus, and little Dave, who's 6'3" and hates his nickname. She learns that Jake's mother is 82, lives alone in Phoenix, that he calls her every Sunday morning without fail. Big Mike tells her about his granddaughter's upcoming baptism, shows her a photo on his phone of a baby, with his same round face and dark eyes. Carlos mentions his wife's garden, how she grows tomatoes that taste like summer, and Johnny talks about the literacy program he volunteers for, teaching adults to read. They're not what she expected, these men in leather with their tattoos and their motorcycles, and Jake can see her recalibrating, understanding that patches and bikes don't tell you who someone is, that kindness lives in unexpected places. The walk takes 15 minutes, and by the time they reach her building, a modest brownstone with flower boxes in the windows and a well-swept stoop, Margaret has stopped shaking. Jake notices the details, the peeling paint on the doorframe, the loose handrail, the dim bulb in the hallway that should have been replaced weeks ago. He makes a mental note, thinks about coming back on Saturday with tools and better lighting. Margaret fumbles with her keys, and her hands are still unsteady, and Tommy reaches out to help, gentle and patient, waits for her to open the door herself. The apartment beyond is small and neat, filled with the smell of lavender and old books, photographs covering every surface. A younger Margaret with a handsome man, who must be Henry, smiling on a beach somewhere, at a wedding, in front of a Christmas tree, 50 years of love documented in silver frames. "Would you like to come in?" Margaret asks, and there's something brave about the offer, about inviting 12 large men into her small, safe space, and Jake shakes his head gently. "We should let you rest, ma'am. It's been a night." But he reaches into his vest pocket, pulls out a card with the chapter's information, the diner's address written on the back in his careful handwriting. "You need anything, day or night, you call this number. Someone will answer, and we're at Rosie's most Tuesday and Thursday evenings if you ever want to stop by for coffee." Margaret takes the card with both hands, holds it like it's precious, and her eyes are bright with tears again, but different ones now, born from unexpected kindness, from remembering that the world has good people in it. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough," she says, her voice breaking on the words, and Jake smiles, a genuine expression that crinkles the corners of his eyes and makes him look younger. "Nobody messes with our neighborhood, ma'am. You're one of ours now." He tips an imaginary hat, an old-fashioned gesture that makes her laugh again, and the sound is pure and sweet and worth everything. As they turn to leave, Margaret calls out, "Wait," and disappears into her apartment, returns a moment later with a small paper bag. "I baked cookies yesterday," she says, almost shy. "Chocolate chip. Henry always said they were the best he ever had." She offers the bag to Jake, and he takes it carefully. Knows without being told that this is something significant, that she's sharing a piece of her heart, her Henry, her before. The engines roar to life one by one, a symphony of chrome and power that shakes the windows and makes car alarms wail 3 blocks away. And Margaret stands in her doorway watching, one hand raised in farewell, and Jake can see her silhouetted against the warm light of her apartment, small and strong and no longer alone. They ride away into the night, taking the long way back to Rosie's, letting the wind and the road wash away the adrenaline, the anger at young punks who prey on the vulnerable, the satisfaction of knowing they made a difference tonight. The cookie bag sits in Jake's saddlebag, and he knows he won't eat them. We'll share them with the brothers back at the diner. We'll tell them about Henry and Margaret and love that outlasts death. And they'll understand because they're all carrying their own ghosts, their own memories of people who made them who they are. At Rosie's, the food is still warm, like she promised, and they eat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes after shared purpose, after doing something right in a world that often feels wrong. Rosie brings out fresh coffee and asks no questions, just squeezes Jake's shoulder as she passes, her way of saying she's proud of them, that this is what community means. They pass around Margaret's cookies, and Tommy declares them the best he's ever had. And Jake reflects on how kindness circulates, how helping someone creates ripples that spread outward, touching people you'll never meet. Tomorrow, he'll organize a work crew, come back to Margaret's building with new light bulbs and paint and tools, fix all the little things that make a place feel unsafe. He'll bring Big Mike's wife's tomatoes when they're ready, introduce Margaret to Rosie properly, fold her into their strange extended family of bikers and diner owners and people who believe that looking out for each other is the whole point. Margaret stands at her kitchen window, long after the motorcycles disappear, listening to the silence, the absence of fear. She makes her tea, the Earl Grey that Henry loved, and sits in his chair, the one by the window where he used to watch the birds. The purse sits on the table beside her, and she runs her fingers over the worn leather, thinks about how close she came to losing it, to losing this last tangible piece of their life together. But she didn't lose it, because angels came in leather, because strangers chose to care, because across the street 12 men were paying attention when it mattered. She imagines Jake's mother in Phoenix, how someone probably looks out for her too, how kindness is a web that catches all of us eventually if we're lucky. The sparrows will come at dawn, like they always do, and she'll have a story to tell them about the night kindness wore steel-toed boots and saved her life, about how the world is stranger and more beautiful than we remember, about how family isn't always blood, but sometimes leather and chrome and men who remember their mothers. She opens the card Jake gave her, reads the address, the phone number, written in careful block letters, and she knows she'll keep it in her purse forever, this proof that she's not alone, that she's one of theirs now. The city noise filters through the window, sirens and horns and the distant rumble of motorcycles, but it doesn't frighten her anymore, because she knows that within those sounds lies protection, community, a dozen men who will answer if she calls. She stands and walks to the wall of photographs, finds her favorite, Henry on their 40th anniversary, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something their daughter said. The restaurant lights soft behind them. "You would have liked them," she whispers to the photograph, to the memory, to the man who taught her that strength appears in unexpected places. "They reminded me of you." Outside, the street is quiet now, the amber streetlights painting everything in shades of gold and shadow, and something shifts inside Margaret, a weight she didn't know she was carrying, finally lifting. Fear had made her world small, made every walk an ordeal, every shadow a threat, but tonight changed something, showed her that for every person who means harm, there are a dozen who will stand between danger and the vulnerable, who will walk you home and remember you're someone's mother, someone's wife, a person worth protecting. She returns to the window, to Henry's chair, and sits with her tea growing cold in her hands, watching the sparrows tree in the darkness, knowing that, come morning, they'll be there, the one with the crooked wing landing sideways, but getting the best seeds anyway, surviving and thriving despite everything. Across the street, Rosie's diner glows orange and warm, and Margaret decides that maybe Thursday evening she'll walk over there, bring another batch of cookies, meet these brothers properly over coffee instead of crisis. Maybe she'll tell them about Henry, about the life they built together across nearly 5 decades, about the garden they grew and the love that hasn't ended just because he's gone. Maybe they'll tell her their stories too, about roads they've traveled and people they've loved and reasons they chose to care when they could have looked away. The night settles around her like a blanket, and for the first time in 3 years, since Henry died, and left her navigating this world alone, Margaret doesn't feel afraid. She feels held by something larger than herself, caught in that web of kindness that stretches between strangers who choose to be family, between the living and the dead, between who we are and who we hope to become. The purse sits on the table, worn and precious, full of memories and receipts and pressed flowers, and the knowledge that some things are worth protecting, that some nights transform everything, that angels sometimes wear leather and answer to names like Jake and Tommy and Big Mike. And when she finally sleeps, she dreams of Henry riding a motorcycle up the coast, the wind in his hair, laughing, and behind him a line of brothers stretching to the horizon, all of them watching over her, keeping her safe, reminding her that love, in all its unexpected forms, never really ends, just changes shape and keeps circling back, again and again, forever.